I, 32 never thought I would be writing a post like this. My name is Robert and I am in complete shock about what happened with my fiancée Alana, 29F. We had been dating for a year before I proposed to her. The way we met seemed like destiny at the time. I was at a charity fundraiser that my company sponsored, feeling bored with all the corporate small talk, when I saw her across the room. She was manning the donation booth, passionately explaining the cause to everyone who stopped by. I was instantly drawn to her intelligence and charm. When I walked up to make a donation, we ended up talking for almost an hour. Alana worked as a program coordinator at the nonprofit organization and her enthusiasm for helping others was contagious. She had this way of making everyone feel special and heard. I asked her out that evening and to my surprise, she said yes. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant. I still remember how nervous I felt, even though I regularly handle million-dollar business deals. There was something about Alana that made me want to impress her. She was different from the women I usually met, who were often more interested in my family's wealth than in me. Our relationship progressed quickly. By the third date, I knew she was special. Within 3 months, we were practically living together, and I officially asked her to move in. My family was surprised at how fast things were moving. My mother especially was concerned, always telling me to take things slow. But even she couldn't help but like Alana once they met. Alana had this way of fitting perfectly into any situation. She got along wonderfully with my mother, often spending afternoons cooking together or going shopping. My father, who rarely approved of anyone I dated, said she had a good head on her shoulders. Early in our relationship, around the 4-month mark, Alana opened up about her past marriage. We were having a quiet evening at home when she started crying while watching a movie scene about domestic abuse. That's when she told me about Greg, her ex-husband. According to her, their marriage had been a nightmare. She described how he would constantly put her down, calling her worthless and stupid. She said he controlled every aspect of her life, from what she wore to who she talked to. The worst part, she told me, was when they found out she was infertile. She described in detail how Greg had taken her to multiple doctors, each confirming she couldn't have children. According to Alana, Greg became even more abusive after that, blaming her for not being able to give him children. She said he would get drunk and scream at her, calling her defective. The final straw was when he left her for another woman who could have children. I felt horrible hearing about what she went through. When she broke down telling me this story, I held her and promised I would never treat her that way. I come from a well-off family. My grandfather started our business from scratch, and my father expanded it significantly. Now I run most of our operations. We're not billionaires, but we live very comfortably. Alana knew about my background from the start, but she never seemed interested in material things. In fact, she would often refuse expensive gifts, saying she valued our emotional connection more than anything else. When I tried to buy her a designer bag for her birthday, she insisted on a simple leather one instead. This made me respect her even more. After dating for a year, I felt ready to propose. I planned everything carefully, wanting to give her the perfect moment she deserved. I reserved the entire rooftop of her favorite restaurant, had it decorated with her favorite flowers, and hired a string quartet. When I got down on one knee, she started crying before I could even finish asking the question. She said yes immediately, and we began planning our wedding. My parents offered to pay for everything, wanting Alana to have her dream wedding. She was overjoyed and threw herself into the planning. She spent hours looking at venues, tasting cakes, and trying on dresses. My mother went with her to all the appointments, and they grew even closer during this time. Everything seemed perfect until last week. I was working from home and needed to print some urgent documents for a meeting. My printer was acting up, so I asked Alana if I could use her laptop to print them through her wireless printer. She said of course. We always used each other's devices freely, having nothing to hide from each other. While looking for the documents folder, I accidentally clicked on an old folder labeled 2021 Memories. What I saw made my blood run cold. There were pictures of Alana with a clear baby bump. She looked happy, standing in what appeared to be a baby shower with friends around her. The timestamp showed the pictures were from 3 years ago. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. Alana had told me she was infertile, that her ex-husband had left her because of it. But here she was, clearly pregnant in these photos. My hands shaking, I scrolled through more pictures and found ones of her throughout different stages of pregnancy. She looked radiant and happy in all of them, often posing with Greg, who was smiling and had his hands on her belly. My mind was racing with questions. Why would she lie about something so huge? What happened to the baby? Was everything else she told me about her past also a lie? I closed the laptop and tried to act normal when she came home that evening, but inside I was devastated. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about those pictures and all the times Alana had talked about her infertility. She would get emotional whenever we saw babies or pregnant women, saying how she wished she could experience motherhood. Sometimes she would cry after visiting friends who had just had babies, and I would comfort her, feeling helpless that I couldn't fix this for her. Now I felt sick thinking about how she had manipulated my emotions. The next morning, I decided I needed to know the truth. I couldn't confront Alana yet, I needed proof first. I had Greg's full name from our marriage license application where Alana had to list her previous marriage. It wasn't hard to find him on social media. What I found shattered any remaining doubt I had about Alana's deception. Update 1. After finding those pictures on Alana's laptop, I spent hours going through Greg's social media profiles. Initially, his Facebook showed only public photos, but I sent him a friend request hoping to see more. To my surprise, he accepted it within an hour. That's when I saw something that made my stomach turn: recent pictures of him with a little girl who looked exactly like Alana. The girl appeared to be around 3 years old, with Alana's exact same dimples and eyes. I went through his entire profile, post by post. There were pictures of him taking the little girl to parks, celebrating her birthdays, and doing normal father-daughter activities. In every photo, they both looked happy. There was no sign of the abusive monster Alana had described. In fact, his friends' comments on these photos praised him for being such a devoted single father. I found myself getting angry looking at these photos. Here was a child, clearly Alana's daughter, living life without her mother, while Alana played the victim about being infertile. It made me sick thinking about all the times she had cried about not being able to have children, knowing she had abandoned her own child. I gathered my courage and messaged Greg. I kept it simple. Hi Greg, my name is Robert. I'm Alana's fiancé, or at least I was until I found some old photos. I think we need to talk. He responded within minutes, saying he had been wondering when someone would finally discover the truth. We agreed to meet the next day at a coffee shop in his town, about 2 hours away from where I lived. I told Alana I had an emergency business meeting and drove to meet Greg. I was nervous the entire drive, my mind creating scenarios about what I might learn. Part of me still hoped there would be some explanation that would make sense of everything. Greg wasn't anything like what I expected. Instead of the abusive alcoholic Alana had described, I met a simple, hard-working mechanic who owned his own small shop. He was dressed casually in jeans and a clean work shirt, and seemed genuinely kind. When I told him what Alana had told me about their marriage, the abuse, the drinking, the infertility, he looked shocked and then sadly amused. She's still telling that story, huh? He said, pulling out his phone. He showed me pictures of their daughter Emma, now 3.5 years old. He had full custody because Alana had walked out on them when Emma was just 6 months old. According to Greg, their marriage had been happy at first, but Alana had grown increasingly dissatisfied with their modest lifestyle. They lived in a small but nice apartment, drove reliable but older cars, and made enough to live comfortably if not luxuriously. Greg worked as a mechanic and had recently opened his own shop when they got married. Alana worked at a local non-profit then too, but she started complaining about everything. Their apartment was too small, their car too old, their lifestyle too boring. Greg showed me text messages from that time period. Messages where Alana complained about being stuck in a dead-end life and how she deserved better than this. He worked extra shifts at the shop trying to provide more, but it was never enough. When she got pregnant, they were both excited at first. Greg showed me videos of them preparing the nursery together, both looking happy. But after Emma was born, things changed dramatically. Alana became distant and started going out more, leaving Greg alone with the baby. She complained about how the baby was ruining her figure, how she couldn't do anything fun anymore. She started dressing differently, going to upscale bars with new friends, and coming home late. Then one day, while Greg was at work and his mother was watching Emma, Alana packed her bags and left. She sent Greg a text saying she never wanted this life, that she was meant for better things than being a mechanic's wife and a young mother. She said she needed to find herself and live the life she deserved. What really broke my heart was when Greg showed me the court documents. Alana had signed away her parental rights without any hesitation. She didn't ask for any visitation, didn't want any connection to Emma. She told her lawyer she wanted a clean break to start a new life. Greg showed me texts where Alana clearly stated she didn't want anything to do with Emma because a child would just hold me back from finding a better life. I felt physically ill reading those messages. The woman I thought I knew, the one who cried over baby clothes and got emotional at the sight of pregnant women, had willingly abandoned her own child. Greg even showed me videos of Emma's first birthday party, second birthday, and other milestones. Alana was absent from all of them, never even sending a card or asking how her daughter was doing. Looking at sweet little Emma in those videos and photos, I couldn't understand how anyone could walk away from their child. She was beautiful, happy, and clearly well loved by Greg and his family. But her mother had chosen to pretend she didn't exist, all so she could pursue a wealthier lifestyle. Before I left, Greg gave me copies of all the documentation, court papers, text messages, everything. He said he wasn't interested in revenge, but he thought I deserved to know the truth before I married her. He also suggested I carefully check my finances, as Alana had tried to drain their joint account when she left him. The drive home was a blur. I had gone hoping to find some explanation that would make sense of everything, but instead, I had discovered that the woman I loved was a complete stranger. She hadn't just lied about being infertile, she had abandoned her child and created an entirely false persona to trap a wealthy husband. I knew what I had to do, but I wanted to do it in a way that would ensure she couldn't spin this story to make herself the victim again. That's when I started forming my plan for our upcoming wedding. Update 2: Today was supposed to be my wedding day. Instead, it turned into the day I exposed Alana's lies to everyone. After meeting with Greg, I spent a week carefully planning how to handle this. I wanted to make sure Alana couldn't twist this situation to make herself look like the victim again. I reached out to Greg and asked if he would come to the wedding with Emma. He was hesitant at first, worried about how seeing Alana might affect his daughter. But after I explained my plan, he agreed it was time Alana faced the consequences of her actions. I arranged for them to stay at a hotel near the church and gave them instructions about when to arrive. The morning of the wedding was surreal. I went through all the motions, getting dressed in my tuxedo, taking pictures with my groomsmen, greeting early guests. My parents noticed something was off with me, but I told them I was just nervous. I hadn't told anyone about what I discovered, wanting the truth to come out in front of everyone. The church was packed with 200 guests. All of Alana's new friends from her current job were there, the ones she had told her fake story to. My entire family had come, including relatives from out of state who had only met Alana a few times but thought she was wonderful. I saw Greg and Emma slip into the back just before the ceremony was about to start. When the wedding march began playing and the doors opened, Alana looked beautiful in her wedding dress. She walked down the aisle with such confidence, smiling at everyone. If I hadn't known the truth, I would have thought she was the happiest bride in the world. Looking at her, it was hard to believe this was the same woman who could abandon her child. When the priest asked if anyone objected to our union, Greg stood up. Alana's face went white when she saw him. But what really made her freeze was seeing Emma standing next to him in her little blue dress. Several guests gasped, probably noting the striking resemblance between Alana and Emma. Greg spoke clearly, his voice echoing in the church. He introduced himself as Alana's ex-husband and told everyone how she had abandoned their daughter for a chance at a wealthy lifestyle. The look of panic on Alana's face was unforgettable. She tried to run, but I grabbed her arm and said loudly that everyone deserved to hear the truth. Greg had brought copies of everything he had shown me. He read out some of Alana's old messages where she explicitly stated she was leaving because she wanted to marry someone rich. He showed everyone pictures of Alana with Emma as a newborn, proving she had lied about being infertile. My mother, sitting in the front row, looked horrified as she realized all those times she had comforted Alana about not being able to have children had been based on lies. Alana finally broke down in tears, but they weren't the same convincing tears I had seen before when she told me about her supposed infertility. These were tears of humiliation and anger at being caught. Through her sobs, she finally admitted everything. She confessed to leaving Greg and Emma because she wanted a more luxurious life. She said she made up the abuse story because she thought no one would accept her if they knew she had abandoned her child. I announced to everyone that the wedding was cancelled. My mother, who had grown so close to Alana, was crying as she walked up to hug Emma. My father, always the practical one, helped Greg document everything in case Alana tried to spin another story later. Several of Alana's friends from her current job looked disgusted, probably realizing all the sympathy they had given her was based on lies. Alana tried to approach me one last time, saying she really did love me and that she could explain everything. I coldly told her that someone who could abandon their own child wasn't capable of real love. She fled the church in tears while her bridesmaids stood there in shock. I stayed behind to apologize to all our guests for the scene, but most of them were supportive, saying I had dodged a bullet. My parents took care of informing the reception venue and other vendors about the cancellation. Greg and Emma stayed for a while, and seeing my mother dote on Emma made me realize that some good had come from this horrible situation. That little girl would now have more people in her life who cared about her. Update 3: Life has changed dramatically in the past 6 months. After the wedding disaster, my parents helped me deal with all the cancellations and vendor refunds. Most vendors were surprisingly understanding when they heard what happened. I lost some deposit money, but considering what I almost got myself into, it was a small price to pay. Alana tried to contact me multiple times in the weeks following the failed wedding. She sent long emails explaining how she had changed and how abandoning Emma was her biggest regret. She claimed she was young and stupid then, and that meeting me had made her want to be a better person. I didn't respond to any of these messages. Then she started showing up at places she knew I frequented, my favorite coffee shop, my gym, even my office building. Security had to escort her out twice. Her final attempt to contact me was through her mother, who I had never met during our relationship. The woman called me crying, saying Alana was devastated and had moved back home. She tried to explain that Alana had suffered from postpartum depression after Emma's birth, which was why she left. I told her that mental health issues might explain Alana's initial departure, but they didn't excuse her maintaining the lie for years or making up stories about Greg being abusive. Greg and I have actually become good friends. He's one of the most genuine people I've ever met. Emma is an amazing little girl, smart and funny like her dad. She loves animals and wants to be a veterinarian. My family, especially my mother, has unofficially adopted Emma as their granddaughter. We often have Sunday dinners together, and my mom is teaching Emma how to bake cookies, just like she always wanted to do with her own grandchild. Last week, I heard through mutual friends that Alana is engaged again, this time to a wealthy real estate developer in another city. Apparently, she's telling everyone she's a widow with no children. When I heard this, I sent the developer's office an anonymous email with proof of who Alana really is. I don't know if he received it or what he did with the information, but I felt obligated to at least try to warn him. My family suggested I start dating again, but I'm taking my time. The experience with Alana taught me a lot about trust and how easy it is for someone to create a completely false persona. I'm focusing on my business, which has actually grown significantly in the past few months since I've been putting all my energy into work. Sometimes I look at Emma during our family dinners and wonder how anyone could abandon such a precious child for money. She recently started calling my mom Grandma Jane, which made my mother cry with happiness. Greg said Emma has been doing much better in school since having more family around, and her counselor noted significant improvements in her confidence. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm grateful I discovered the truth before marrying Alana. It's scary to think how easily she could lie and manipulate people's emotions. Every time I remember how she used to cry about being infertile, I feel sick knowing she had a beautiful daughter she willingly abandoned. I guess some people can justify anything in their pursuit of wealth. At least now Emma has more people in her life who truly care about her, which is perhaps the only good thing to come out of this whole mess.